The Metro Monitor is getting at a story that sometimes gets lost in the national numbers around the economic downturn, and that is that we don't have just one national economy. We actually have a distinct set of metropolitan economies across the country, 366 of them, that vary really widely in their economic performance. This monitor concentrates on the 100 largest of those metropolitan areas, which represent about 2/3 of U.S. jobs, generate about 3/4 of our GDP. And if you look back over the last 15 months, which is the subject of this monitor, you see great variance in changes in employment, changes in wages, changes in home prices. And so we've got some very distinct levels of economic performance across the country that differentiate, say, how some manufacturing metros are doing this time around. Very distinct set of metropolitan areas in the Northeast doing pretty well because they specialize in things like aerospace and photonics and plastics that have performed pretty well over the course of this recession. Then you have another set of metropolitan areas that are heavily dependent upon the auto sector that have really gotten battered across all indicators. These metros tend to be in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. So I think, in the national numbers, when you think about manufacturing, it's a tough story. But actually, there are very different types of manufacturing metropolitan areas when you look beneath the veneer of national statistics. I think what this Metro Monitor is trying to communicate to federal policymakers is that the strategies that have been employed thus far to get the national economy back on its feet, broad fiscal, broad monetary policy, certainly necessary, we think, but probably not sufficient for grounding a nationwide, broad-based recovery. That, what's been done so far is probably all that's needed in some of the metropolitan areas that are showing signs of recovery already, and that never got quite as affected by the recession in the first place. But there are some that are still on the downslope, are going to remain on that downslope for a long time. So what that suggests, I think, is that as policymakers think about possibly a next round of stimulus or the budget proposals that get adopted coming into the next fiscal year, I think they need to keep in mind the notion of perhaps more targeted assistance to areas of the country that are going to take longer to recover, those with an overhang from the decline in the housing market, and those that are most affected by the downturn in the big three in the auto sector. And we have a recovery czar for auto communities. We have the promise of a new green economy. I think in particular in those metropolitan areas in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and parts of the South, how those strategies and resources are deployed in targeted ways is going to be real meaningful for when those metropolitan areas are able to make a full recovery. It remains to be seen what a major federal health care reform bill would do to the many parts of the United States that specialize in healthcare and healthcare services. There are a few things to consider. One is what role does the medical research sector play in reform, and if there are more dollars applied, for instance, to things like the use of technology in improving healthcare. I think there are a lot of metropolitan areas that stand to benefit from that sort of investment in coordinating care.